This is the Pepperwood Podcast, a production of Pepperwood, a nonprofit conservation organization based at a 3,200-acre nature reserve near Santa Rosa, California, in the heart of the traditional homeland of the Wapo people. At Pepperwood, we aim to inspire conservation through science. And on this show, we talk to scientists, stewards, and environmental educators about what they do and how they do it. We hope to give you a glimpse into the real experiences of folks who devote their lives to taking care of local ecosystems and sharing them with others. Welcome back to the Pepperwood Podcast. Today we welcome back Fire and Stewardship Manager Devyn Friedfel to talk about a prescribed burn that he planned and coordinated, which took place in October of 2025. Devyn will tell us about the area that was treated and how the stewardship team prepared the land for a broadcast burn. He's going to introduce us to the many partners who supported burn implementation and the different types of data that were collected before, during, and after the burn. Devyn's going to describe his preliminary impressions of how the burn went, and he'll reflect on what makes complex stewardship actions like this possible. Throughout the conversation, Devyn integrates the big picture perspectives on the importance and challenges of integrating fire into stewardship practices, as well as lessons that the Pepperwood team has learned from years of adaptive management of our 3,200-acre property. Now that all is a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. What area was treated, and why was this particular zone selected as a priority for prescribed burn treatment?
On October 23rd, we burned the North Dwight Center unit, which is a 70-acre broadcast burn between our North Road and our main Pepperwood Road. And encompassed in that unit is both the Dwight Center and the Bechtel House.
So our major permanent buildings are like right adjacent to the area that you were treating.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is one of the reasons it was a priority area, right? So creating defensible space, also using fire in a place where it is forced for everybody to look at. So anybody that drives up to Pepperwood is like, oh, what'd you do up there?
Interesting. So it's a little bit of a showcase as well as being very practical.
Exactly. So, and it's also along our main north-south ridge, which is identified by CAL FIRE as a strategic fuel break.
Ooh, so from a landscape perspective, it's also got a real practicality.
Exactly. And it's along road systems. And so generally fuels treatment for defensible space, strategic fuel breaks, building them off of road systems is critical because that's the ingress, egress for emergency responders to have an anchor point to kind of build off of. And so really thinking about between our two kind of major road systems along our major north-south ridge line next to our buildings, this was like the highest priority strategic fuels reduction, fire mitigation burn I think we could do.
Excellent.
This area had burnt in 2017. Okay. So there was a lot of dead wood. That area burnt really hot. When you have these extreme wildfires burning through heavy fuel areas, the net result isn't necessarily fuels reduction. These wildfires, these extreme wildfires, where you already have a lot of fuel, so you actually are getting high tree mortality. You're killing a lot of wood, but it's not actually burning it all the way down. So you might be burning off some dead wood, but then you're creating more dead wood by killing trees. We went in initially with chainsaws, and we actually took a lot of the dead woody fuel and ladder fuel, so dead fuel up to like 6 feet, small diameter Doug fir trees. We left a lot of dead standing wood for snag habitat. So our goal wasn't to reduce all of the fuel, but to kind of lower it down to a point that we felt a broadcast burn would get the results that we wanted. So we took all that cut wood and we put it into piles and we burnt those piles. Reference Pile Burn podcast if you're interested in piles.
Absolutely. Tune in to Season 1, Episode 2, titled Fires That Heal, Exploring the Art of Pile Burning in California, to hear from Devyn about the use of pile burns.
So since we did that fuels reduction, we felt like bringing in a broadcast burn 3 years post pile burning to kind of let the land heal a little bit. We did a lot of grass plug planting into those pile scars. We did a lot of restoration to kind of restore the pile burning scars, and kind of tended to that land in that time and let the fine fuel, so the grass, the leaf litter, build itself back up to be ready for this broadcast burn.
So there were years of pre-treatment going into this burn.
We had been thinking about this burn for at least 5 years. So there was been a lot of thought. I think I wrote the burn plan in 2023 for this burn unit.
Right.
But we'd really been thinking about it, and we got to this tendency just from trying other methods of, originally before the Tubbs fire, we were doing a lot of lop and scatter with the idea that this material would decompose and that would be a great way for fuels reduction. However, we burnt in the Tubbs fire. We found that the area we did this lop and scatter treatment actually were the areas that saw the highest tree mortality, because dead down fuel burns hotter than live standing fuel. So even those areas with a lot of little Doug firs, those little Doug firs had live fuel moisture in it, and that material wasn't condensed. So when we cut all that material and left it dead on the ground, when the wildfire came through, we saw really high tree mortality.
Right. It sounds like you almost had a shift where you had to start thinking about a higher burn return interval than you expected, because the return interval isn't, unfortunately, just based on our prescribed burn plan. It's also based on the potential for wildfires.
Right. And then come 2019, we burn again in the Kincaid fire.
Right.
And I think the Kincaid fire was the really aha moment, I think, of oh my God, we can burn any year. Then 2020 comes around, and we had the Hennessy fire, which we saw the plume, the Glass fire, which was a ridge away from us. When the Glass fire was going, it was like, we're going to burn 3 times in 4 years. So that really shifts the way you think about these fire return intervals.
Right. Yeah, your resilience against wildfire becomes a stronger priority when you realize it might be coming almost in a year.
Yeah. And so that post 2019, we're like, we need to prepare the land and our communities for a wildfire next summer.
Right.
Every year we're really thinking about that. So it's what can we do to the best, and what actions are we taking? Are our actions, if we're going to do a lop and scatter treatment, we need to reduce that fuel before next summer,
right? Because
that extra fuel we put on the ground is now adding to that fire hazard.
Right. You can't count on that being allowed to decompose out there. It may not get the chance.
Yeah, because you're holding your breath every summer. And we've been really fortunate in Sonoma County, post 2020, I think, we haven't really had too many extreme fires in our communities.
Sure.
However, we can't forget, right? It's these catch people by surprise. And so we still are operating under that assumption that we might burn next summer, and how do we prepare our land the best for next summer?
Okay. And this burn was beautifully tailored toward that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we did our fuels reduction work. We burnt those piles. I think we finished burning those piles in, 2023. Let that land kind of recover for the rest of 23, then 24, and then the majority of 25.
Then October of 2025 arrived, and it was time to light the fire, with the support of some key community partners that Devyn was eager to give credit to.
First and foremost, CAL FIRE was a major partner. They've identified Pepperwood as a strategic fuel break. They've stopped the Kincaid fire on our property. We have a major north-south ridge with a lot of grassland on it, and we have a road system that kind of runs down that ridge. And when you get east-west winds, which is typically what happens, we get the Diablo winds, these big offshore winds coming from the valley, hot air blowing towards the coast, which is the result of the Tubbs fire and the Kincaid fire, really having these extreme events. So Pepperwood is this place kind of between Napa Valley and the Santa Rosa Plain that is in this wild and urban interface, and really provides an opportunity for CAL FIRE and other, emergency responders to kind of make a stand.
Right.
And so we work closely with CAL FIRE. They
understand Pepperwood as sort of its place in the landscape. This is a known quantity for them.
And they also understand that we have staff and resources that we're sinking into this land to try and support that work. So I think our partnership's wonderful. I think they appreciate us, and we hugely appreciate them. So CAL FIRE has been a great partner. They help us with resources to put these burns on. They help us with permits. They help us with kind of putting the word out to the community, people that are concerned. It's really nice to have CAL FIRE being like, nope, we're here to support. They totally know what they're doing. So first and foremost, CAL FIRE was a major partner on this. Fire Forward with All Hands Ecology is always a major supporter. Most of my fire knowledge has been through Sasha Berlman and their team. She's no longer there, but that team is just continually supporting good fire in our community and really kind of pushing the edge of that. And so they're a huge partner. They're always being supportive of us.
In this fire in particular, like were they being represented on the day?
In this fire in particular, yeah, they had a crew out here. And in my planning process and burn writing process, I would, ask multiple of them to come out and kind of help me think about it. Garrett Gerdiez really kind of took the lead in supporting me. And so, I think it's always good when you're thinking about fire to have multiple people thinking about it, because you're making a lot of assumptions. Like, okay, this is what I'm thinking is going to happen. This is where my break is. Now, what do you think? Like, what am I missing? What are my gaps? And I think fire forces you to be extremely humble, because you have to make a lot of assumptions and you need to check those, and different people have different experiences and everyone has a different lens at seeing things. And so it's really important to have other experienced people put their thoughts and kind of help build on that.
Kind of pressure test all of your ideas and your guesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they have a great team at that. And so Garrett and I have worked together for years on burns and stuff. And so it was really helpful to have him. Paul Sokoloski, who runs their crews there, also is really supportive. He's was a hot shot for the Forest Service for years. So like basically the highest level of firefighting you can. He jumped out of planes to go fight wildfire. So
an incredible amount of practical experience.
Exactly.
There.
So much fire experience. And the more fire experience you have, the more you can understand fire, right? Because there's all these different scenarios and you have to okay, well, this happened in this time, so this is kind of similar to that, but it's slightly more like this. So you're just running these scenarios in your head all the time to try and predict what happens. And then you prepare for it going sideways and not happening a million other ways. So it's really important. So fire forward, not only on the day, but also in the mental preparation and kind of planning process. The Good Fire Alliance, which is our local PBA, which is compiled of community members. Pepperwood's a member of Good Fire Alliance. I am, Fire Forward team is, Sonoma Land Trust, but a lot of community members as well. They were a big supporter in helping get the word out, bringing in, people, resources, and just good PR for us and just kind of supporting that. So the Good Fire Alliance, I think those were the major players in implementation.
In addition to partnering with other agencies and organizations for implementation, Devyn coordinated with a number of research partners who all examined different aspects of the burn. In one case, the desire for prescribed fire research opportunities also provided funding that helped make the burn happen.
The implementation of the prescribed fire was partially funded through CAL FIRE through a research grant that went to Laura Cuppers at a UC Berkeley, who is a climate modeler and a bunch of other stuff, but was really interested in studying how prescribed fire kind of has impact on climate versus wildfires. And so putting fire in the category of this is what fire does to climate and carbon emissions, she was taking the approach of well, not all fire is equal. Let's really start to understand what prescribed fire is. There is a bunch of models and stuff that goes into it. So this is data to go into models. Pepperwood also has some forest plots of their own. So Michelle Halber and Matha Clark also have forest research plots that are just kind of Pepperwood's own research plots here. And so adding to studying prescribed fire from an ecological perspective, fuels reduction, how is it impacting the trees? How is it impacting the canopy? How is it impacting the herbaceous understory plants? I like to think about it putting our finger on the pulse of the forest.
Right.
So we're not only looking at climate, but we're looking at ecological impacts on individual trees, impacts on communities, herbaceous understory, tree health, and fuels reduction. Then we also were working with Stanford. Jessica Yu and some of her lab mates were looking at smoke impact. So particulate matter, PM 2.5, and how smoke is moving with fire. And they have monitoring. They put air quality sensors kind of all over the units, outside the units, and monitor it for multiple days. So not just during the burn, but multiple days during there. Then we had a scientist from the California Department of Public Health looking at volatile organic compounds, so VOCs. VOCs are really interesting and they're not really well known. And there's a lot of interest in it because both from a human health perspective impact, but also in the North Bay, we have a lot of vineyards. So there's something called smoke taint, where smoke can adversely impact the grapes during the veraison period. So right when the grapes are kind of finishing and getting their final sugar content on them, intense and heavy amounts of smoke can cause smoke taint. So it makes the grapes not as desirable. Smoke taint is caused by volatile organic compounds. It's not caused by PM 2.5.
Right. I think this is like a major shift for me in my understanding. It's like, it's not just if any smoke at all is moving over the grapes. It's not like you then get grapes that like literally taste smoky. It's something much more subtle. It's a less discernible part. And it's maybe a part of smoke. These VOCs may or may not be a part of smoke. Like we don't actually know depending on the fire. It's not just particulate that you know is going to, whether you burn a TV set or an oak tree, it'll definitely be there. We don't actually know what the source is.
And so we kind of know the VOCs that cause smoke taint. We figured that out. Okay. But we don't know the intensity and duration. So there's a lot of information that needs to be.
The intensity and duration of
what will cause smoke taint.
Of what
like how much of that smoke on the grapes at what density and what duration cause it. So there's a lot to be learned about it. Okay. We don't understand what vegetation burnings create what VOCs. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. And I think the VOC monitoring that happened on this burn is really trying to just start to pick at those pieces and go, what these VOCs are getting created from this burn. So we had about 5 VOC monitor system across this burn. So PM 2.5 VOCs from the smoke perspective. There also was a company, and they are really interested in making low cost, easy to implement LiDAR for understanding fuel mitigation work basically across. So like taking LiDAR and going, hey, here's your fire risk and concern. Here's how you can kind of reduce it, or you need to reduce it because there's high fire risk here. And so LiDAR has been pretty expensive. So they're trying to make quick, low cost using drones to get LiDAR. And so
basically like being able to use LiDAR to assess a landscape and say like, if you have this much vegetation according to our LiDAR.
Yeah, and fire models.
Yes. Then you have an elevated risk or you don't have an elevated risk.
Right.
Like being able to understand that based on the data that they're getting.
Or understanding how treatments worked. So if you're going to treat a land to reduce fire risk, how well did that work? Where are your priority areas? And so this is not a new idea that they came up with, but their approach is to make low cost. So I see that really effective and happening in WUI landscapes and really just kind of
the wildlife urban interface.
So people that live in not totally rural areas, but most of like the rural areas in Sonoma County are WUI. We don't have true wilderness. Maybe if you're up in Annapolis or something, you can call yourself true wilderness.
Right.
But even here at Pepperwood, we're kind of WUI.
Yeah, we're close enough to the urban that we are an interface and not simply wilderness.
Exactly. And the fires that happen here are going to impact our urban areas. What makes Pepperwood pretty unique is we're working with all these people, right? You can run LiDAR, but you need ground truthing, right? Yeah. How well is your LiDAR working? So we have these on the ground data sets that are going like, okay, this is what's actually happening on the ground. Does that match what the LiDAR is saying? So it's ground truthing for remote sensing.
That's
right?
Really great.
So everything, if we go to remote sensing, it makes things cheaper, less human labor, less physical labor. It sounds like we might be taking field tech's jobs, but a lot of this stuff is really, really physical, brutal work, and it allows us to get into remote areas and really assess things in areas that people really couldn't do.
Right. So we're not taking field tech's jobs so much as doing work that could not possibly be done with any army of humans.
And there's not a lot of funding for this stuff. Right. So we're able to lower the costs of doing this work that is very needed in a lot of communities for protecting homes and protecting lives. So
incredible.
Yeah. So the ground truthing aspect really this was the first time they were able to capture live fire. There's not a lot of places that are like open arms accepting researchers to come and study fire. So
but Pepperwood is.
Yeah. This place was really unique. The Bay Area Air Quality Control District also had somebody out here that was kind of monitoring our smoke impact. This was the first time that they've been able to come out to a prescribed burn And so they got to observe what actually prescribed burns, because we need air quality permits to do burning. And so we do a smoke management plan. So this was the first time that some members from the Bay Area Air Quality Control District came out to actually see a prescribed burn, because they deal with them a lot, and they're doing their weather models and going, well, this is what the smokes could do. So they could come out, and it was really great for them to see Pepperwood and see how much data and research we were actually doing on this burn.
That truly was a lot of concentrated data collection for one prescribed burn. To sum up, those research partners included Pepperwood's science team, UC Berkeley, Stanford University, the California Department of Public Health, a tech company which is called FireScore AI, by the way, and observation from the Bay Area Air Quality Control District. It was also crucial to coordinate with our neighbors and to consider their needs and concerns, and that was clearly a priority for Devyn during this burn.
Because this was in the front end of her property, it was a lot closer to neighbors. It wasn't out in the middle of her preserve. And so we have a vineyard, Link's Vineyard, which is just a small family, which we work with. They're right across the street. And I worked with their vineyard manager about the timing of our burn and the timing of their harvest. And so that relationship went really well, just coordinating with them, like, hey, this is when we're going to burn. They actually harvested the morning of our burn.
Interesting.
And so we were having this relationship, like, well, I'm not going to start burning until 10 o'clock. And well, can you wait till 11 so we can make sure we finish harvesting? And I was like, I'll start on the other end of the burn. You won't see smoke until 11.
There you go.
And so he was pretty fine with it. And so that was just like another factor of like working with our local vineyards to not cause them stress or worry about smoke taint.
Well, that's such an interesting microcosm of this like landscape-wide set of relationships and like these economic concerns that we have. Because just very briefly going back to the VOCs, one of the outcomes of understanding VOCs that is so important is that if we can wrap our arms around when VOCs show up and when those will actually have an effect on grapes, that will hopefully allow vineyards landscape level to be more comfortable with prescribed burns taking place.
Exactly. We're trying to burn for multiple reasons, and one of them is so that your crop isn't impacted by devastating wildfire.
Absolutely.
Because we know wildfires cause smoke taint.
Yes.
We don't know about prescribed fire.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when we think about our landscape level, vineyards actually act as a potential fuel break.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to build and burn off of vineyards to create this safer landscape level treatment to protect our communities is really important.
Right. I think there's a tendency for this to feel like an adversarial relationship where it's like vineyards don't want burns and,
we need to burn.
And what we need, but, and then conservation managers do want certain kinds of burns to take place. So,
and firefighters as well.
And firefighters. Yes. And yeah, exactly.
And our indigenous communities.
But rather than being on opposite sides of the spectrum, it's like, let's figure out how to make sure that we're making these prescribed burns work for you and, reinforce the fact that like these burns are going to benefit you as well on a landscape level and economically, frankly.
And our relationship with Link Vineyard was very much like that. He approached me and was like, hey, I really support the work you're doing. I understand it's really important. I'm thinking about my crop, my income this year after, with agricultural crops, right? You spend all year and then you get a harvest and that's your payday for the whole year. And
Absolutely.
so
these are farmers.
It's really important, right? It's agriculture. So, and agriculture is a huge part of our community and viticulture is a huge part of our community and our economy. And so working closely with them, especially our neighbor ones, and especially when they come with open arms being like, hey, we support you, but how can we work together? And so I think that was a relationship that worked really well. And, we both made kind of trade-offs to support each other. And at the end of the day, they didn't hinder us. We didn't hinder them.
So Devyn had a lot of people and priorities to juggle on October 23rd. And in the time leading up to it, and in the weeks following, no doubt, it was a lot of work. So how did it all turn out? Did this burn accomplish the goals in his burn plan? That is a question that will be answered over the course of years of observation and data collection and analysis, but Devyn had plenty to share about his initial impressions of the impact on the various habitats within this burn unit.
just anecdotally walking through that unit, we definitely were able to reduce heavy fuel loading, fine fuel loading in our forests. A lot of areas where we had a ton of dense trees, we were able to kind of kill off some of those smaller trees while leaving the larger trees still happy and alive. So reducing competition for that while reducing that ladder fuel that would potentially, in a wildfire scenario, that fuel would be able to catch up and create a crown fire, causing higher tree mortality. So we were able to really reduce that brush encroachment into our grasslands. So our grasslands had kind of been getting encroached by brushy species. So we're kind of alleviating that creep, maintaining our open grassland structure that has been part of Pepperwood since time immemorial. So just maintaining that with fire. From that fuels reduction perspective, it went really well. And from that safety perspective, it got CAL FIRE much more familiar with our property, right? So how many, there was, 45 firefighters here during that day, knowing our property, getting to burn our property, understanding it, especially a lot of the leadership that makes decisions during these, understanding the work we put in, it's on their radar now. And then also just looking at it and going like, okay, wow, we've reduced fuels. This is a potential place in the next wildfire scenario.
So we're continuing to build that institutional knowledge and those relationships along with having like practical impacts on the land.
Yeah. Grassland perspective. I want to burn off thatch. We're not really grazed that much in that area. So there's been thatch overloading. So it's kind of like smothering the bare ground, which is reducing the ability for these wildflowers and forb species to kind of grow. They need they need that bare ground. So really opening those structures up. Also annual grasses. We have tons of annual grasses. There's no getting rid of annual grasses, non-native annual grasses in California. They're here. They're here to stay. They're naturalized. They're part of the system.
But we still want to manage them and keep them from smothering literally everything else.
Exactly. And so there is this timing and that grasses are really vulnerable when they're in their cotyledon stage. Grass seeds have just sprouted and they're like, okay, I'm out of my seed form. I'm in my grass form. Their roots are tiny. Their above ground vegetation is pretty tiny. They're really vulnerable. And we have enough thatch, dry material left over from last year's that we can actually carry fire through them and it can burn through these kind of grasses. And so with the timing, and I think we hit this timing really well this year, we burned and it killed off a ton of these annual grasses. The fun thing is a lot of our annual grasses, majority of our annual grasses actually germinate before our native forbs. So what happens is this time period where your native forbs haven't quite gone to seed yet. Some of them probably have, but the majority haven't. But a good portion of your annual grasses have, which is one of the reasons annual grasses can outcompete wildflowers so much, is because they set seed first and they start taking up sunlight and water before your wildflowers have been able to germinate.
Sure, but if you introduce some disruption at that time, you can actually get ahead of it.
Yeah. And so, it's a very specific window because you don't want to do it too late when your forbs have kind of all germinated. But your perennial grasses are deep rooted; they can handle it. So they started shooting up green shoots with no rain because there was tons of soil moisture. So they started setting up green shoots like the next day after the burn.
Exactly.
So you would walk around and be like, "There's only native grasses here."
Yeah.
The annual grasses had another germination round, so there's totally annual grasses coming back. We didn't eliminate all of them, but we took a big chunk of them out. So you walk around now, there's a lot less dense annual grasses coming up, and there's a ton of bare ground. And in that bare ground, we see a lot of forb species. Some of them are non-native, but some of them are native. We also have geophytes, so bulb species. Bulb species love fire. So I think of our brodeas, our triteleas, because they hold the majority of their carbohydrates, energy in the bulb or corum or tuber in the ground. And if it's buried an inch underground, it's not impacted by the fire.
It's incredible how resilient things are underground to fire moving through. Like
heat rises.
and ground is so insulating. It's pretty impressive actually.
So I'm expecting our triteleas and brodeas to have a pretty good year inside that burn unit.
Looking forward to some good wildflower season.
Yeah, so we'll see, and I think there's a learning, right? This is kind of like we're still in this learning page. I've talked to plenty of people that are pretty concerned about your native forbs and stuff and really doing that timing, but we really take our time to go, we can identify some of our early forb species in their vegetative state. And so we look for that, and there is a time where you kind of missed your window. You don't want to really knock back your native forbs.
Sure,
because those are annuals. However, your perennial native grasses love it. They're thriving.
Absolutely.
So from our meadow perspective, that was some of our goals. We crushed those goals. I think we did really wonderful for our meadows with this burn. From our oak woodland perspective, we're really trying to reduce fuel and reduce competition. So really small bays, also some really small oaks and fir trees. So we see in a lot of this forest, a cluster of about 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 small little baby live oaks all kind of grow up in one area. And really with our goal with our forest is we're trying to promote old growth forest. Right? We have a 400-year time scale of how we're stewarding this land. We want to promote old growth trees. And so when we look at these really dense small baby trees kind of growing up, there's not enough room for all of them to become old growth trees.
And that's the beauty of a disturbance like fire, is that it does some sort of like selective culling of all of these sprouts.
And so fire's also selecting for the most fire resilient individual. I could come in there with the paraloppers and hand pull and remove some of those trees, but what am I selecting for? Just visual aesthetics, I guess, or like what makes sense in my brain. However, fire is selecting for fire resilience. So by letting the fire make that decision, it's leaving the individuals that are the most fire resilient.
Right.
So we're actually creating this evolution within this species to promote our forest for more fire resilient individuals in that species. And so you start to think about this over time and you go, how do all of our native species have these really, really fire adapted qualities, like the tannins in the bark, the thick bark, especially in our oak woodlands, they're very fire adapted species. And so you running fire through thousands and thousands of years. Fire has been selecting for our oak trees that are fire resilient for, since time immemorial.
Right.
And so let's just continue with that process. And so letting it kind of select for those individuals. So
it's probably selecting for those genetically is kind of what you're talking about over the long scale. But there also might be a situational selection, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So genetically and also placement.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
You're just actually tucked just right on that little bump of the north side. So it just didn't quite burn as hot there. So it's selecting for spatially, genetically, and like density, right? There might be a fire adapted one, but it's in the cluster of 20 other trees and it's going to burn. And so the question that some people might be thinking is, well, why not let nature select for that?
And it's like, well, that's what fire is. It's a part of nature.
Absolutely. And burning under the conditions, that's not going to kill all those trees.
Yes.
We wait for that wildfire scenario, the Tubbs fire, the Kincaid fire, the Glass fire, the Hennessy fire, the Walbridge fire. That's just the fires in Sonoma County, the major fires in Sonoma County in the last 5 years.
They're not going to select. They're just going to raise.
Right.
Right.
And so then that's going to cause more fuel, a ton other flush of germination, because the trees are going like, we need to produce more acorns because none of our babies made it. However, right, you start to leave a couple of them, that leaves more shading out. And so they're less likely to get more germination in areas that are much more shaded, right? So now you're actually preparing your landscape to produce a lot less tiny babies, but shifting towards helping the individuals that made it grow older, become that old growth structure. There's a ton of research papers that go, old growth trees hold so much more carbon than a bunch of small trees. And so that's how we're trying to shift to both for our climate. Also, old growth oak trees are creating more acorns, creating more food for our biodiverse area. So we have high biodiversity in the North Bay because of our old growth oak trees.
Nice.
And our grasslands, a bunch of other things. So really thinking from that oak woodland perspective, we're trying to promote old growth trees.
Right. Like pushing for this high production of acorns, like supports all of the other ecology around it, all of the other, everything that feeds on that.
Shade structure, dead wood for, funguses and beetles, and your old growth trees just are a little bit healthy and more disease resilient.
Old growth oaks are,
aesthetically too, right?
Sure, they're gorgeous.
You want to walk through a bunch of trees versus a bunch of scrubby little trees you gotta push your way through. I think of our wildlife, I always mention, like, if you're a buck with big 4 points and you're looking for your mate and you have a huge rack on your head, where do you want to?
You want to walk through a nice park and not a thick cluster of tiny trees. Absolutely. So everything benefits there.
Yeah. From a chaparral perspective, we saw a really mosaic effect And so some of our chaparral maybe burned a little hotter than we wanted it to. Some of it didn't burn at all. That chaparral has a much greater fire return interval. And so bringing fire into the chaparral area maybe didn't make sense from an ecological and cultural perspective. And that was one of my concerns going in is I don't want the chaparral to torch.
Right.
Because it's not ready to torch. However, we didn't want the chaparral really close to our buildings. So pushing it away from our buildings, I think was a win from that community fire perspective.
Yeah.
And then it didn't torch the whole chaparral.
Right.
It was really spotty. So I think there's going to be a quick recovery of it. And when I say quick from an ecological timescale, right, we're not going to see it come right back in the next couple of years, but it'll slowly move its way there. And I think that goes to the perspective of trying to burn on one single day for 4 different ecological objectives.
Absolutely. So of those 4 objectives, like maybe the chaparral wasn't our best result, but it wasn't catastrophic.
Yes.
Okay. If you could have just been burning if that was your whole goal for chaparral, what would you have preferred to wait 3 years or
wait 15 years?
Wait 15 years. Okay.
I don't really know, but it would have been waiting a lot longer.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
All right,
but
so
all those other concerns coming into play meant that, a slightly less than optimal impact in the chaparral had to be considered.
So why did I draw the burn unit the way I drew it?
Yeah.
Because I had roads on 3 sides of it. And so 70 acres is a lot. Implementing Fireline with a team of a really small team that our stewardship team has at Pepperwood is I need to build off of our physical structure. Also, that allowed us to get engines in. I think implementing control lines can cause some ecological damage. And so really building off of that. So
reducing the amount of actual removal of vegetation for the purpose of fire lines.
Right. So really just building off the roads, allowing better safety concern, right? Public perception. Also, we don't really want to lose burn. So roads are a much better control line. You can get big engines up with them. Also the labor input to prepare the land. Also just from that strategic point that CAL FIRE is saying, hey, we want better ingress egress roads, right? Places that we can drive in that are safe, that we feel like we can get our engines through. And so really burning off these roads was important. So I think there were trade-offs that we made with this burn. Some ecological with some input ones, with some safety ones. So there's so many factors that go into this. There are some trade-offs. Yeah. And I look at our chaparral and my perspective wasn't catastrophic. I agree it maybe burnt in some areas slightly hotter, but you go back and you see those plants are resprouting. I think some follow-up treatment, kind of cutting some dead wood out in this opportunity, I think makes a lot of sense. And it's really just to the point that fire is a tool. It's not the end all be all, right? Our goal is not to put fire on the ground.
No, yeah. Fire is not the end of the line. Fire is a means to an end or several ends.
And there's a lot of work to get fire ready, and there's a lot of work post-fire.
Yeah.
We have 25,000 grass plugs. All 25,000 grass plugs are going to this burn unit. With the diversity of ecosystems allows us to put 5 different species of grasses into these areas to help it recover. We've had some wildflower seeds that we've collected, and we're also putting those forb seeds in this area. So there's a ton of restoration, ton of thought that's going into this, and there's some lessons to be learned. So some of the lessons, I think we burnt this unit on the very cool end of our spectrum. Because this is when the timing allowed us to do it. There are some pressures for grant funding. Hey, you need to get this burn done. Researchers that have all these plots set up, and you're like, okay, well, here's our burn window. We have a week. We actually had to bump this fire up a week, which was a big challenge, and that's a big shout out to CAL FIRE because I had a lot of resources that no longer could make my burn because I bumped it up a week. I bumped it up a week because we had a big storm coming. I tried to get the burn in right before the storm. So CAL FIRE stepped up and was like, yeah, what do you need? So they brought us a ton of resources that I wasn't originally requesting from them, but they wanted to see this burn happen too.
Yeah, that's a major challenge, I feel like, with getting fire on the ground as a tool is that you have all of these considerations. You have this very specific window, and then the weather never gets the memo of when it should be a safe condition to burn.
We also had a ton of fog this year. And so even though we didn't have rain, it wasn't drying out the way it dried out. So this burn, we burn on the cooler end of the spectrum.
Gotcha. Just because of, climate conditions that are so far beyond our control.
Absolutely. So this is where aspect comes in. there's a lot of factors in prescribed fire, but one pretty major one that we deal with in California and especially at Pepperwood is aspect. So which direction is your slope facing? South-facing slopes get more sunlight exposure throughout the day, right? Our sun's in the southern hemisphere, so it's pointing at the south-facing slope. They get a lot hotter, drier, more direct solar radiation. So they're drying out faster, they're heating up, they're much more susceptible to burning year-round.
And you're likely to see different kinds of vegetation because of all of that.
Exactly.
Right.
Probably those areas have burnt more historically, so you might have vegetation communities that are much more adapted to fire. North-facing slopes, during our winter months, if you have a really steep north-facing slope, it's cold and wet and the sunlight doesn't ever hit it.
Right.
There's plenty of places at Pepperwood that you can stand there, throughout the whole sunlight day and the sun will never touch you. And it'll stay wet even though you've had hot, dry weather for a month, but it's still soggy there. So when it comes to prescribed fire on areas with hills, you're going to get a different of effects across this landscape. So there's some north-facing slopes that didn't burn. We tried our hardest to burn them and they wouldn't burn.
Sure.
Our west-facing slopes burnt really, really beautifully. And south-facing slopes.
Just the way you wanted them to.
Just the way we wanted to. Our east and north-facing slopes, which are the cooler end, the east-facing, you get that morning sun. It's cooler. There's fog sometimes. It's not drying out as much. Your west-facing, you get that hotter afternoon sun. So south and west for us are kind of the warmer ones. North and then east are kind of like the cooler end. So our north and east aspects didn't burn as hot as we wanted to. Even some of the areas that were really flat didn't really burn because there wasn't the slope to carry the fire. Fire wants to move up. So when it's not like a way to push, it like kind of just goes around. The other thought on burning it hotter was we'd just done a ton of fuels reduction in this area. Could have waiting 3 or 4 more years to let that fuel build up actually helped carry fire better through there and reduce longer term, larger fuel through there.
Interesting.
We did see fuels burning down, and we let fuels burn down for about 3 or 4 days. So we saw some heavy fuel burning down, took out some of our big hazard trees. It did a lot of that kind of heavy fuel reduction in some areas, didn't do it in some other areas. So I think it just goes to show when you try and burn 70 acres is you're not going to get the results you want
on every single inch of that land. Yeah,
exactly.
Some of them are going to not quite burn as hot, and some of them are going to burn. We could have used a little less over here.
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly. So from that perspective, there's some areas we didn't get the results we want, but some areas we got really good results we want. So it was really patchy. Plus it was putting the fire up front. So there's this kind of like PR perspective. There's the relationship building perspective from our researchers and our partners.
And the legitimate research and the data.
And the research and the data and our community. And just to see that we didn't get much pushback from it is like, we've come a long way. There's a saying in fire and a lot of things is like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, this burn didn't happen perfectly. I didn't get the ecological and cultural and community safety results I wanted on every square inch. But around 70, 75, maybe 80% of the land base, I did.
If your bar is perfection, then you shouldn't be doing any work whatsoever, right?
Right. And then we know the result of not doing work.
Absolutely. Yeah, the result of not doing work is predictably bad. So.
Inaction is an action.
Yes.
Right.
And
not doing anything is a choice. You're choosing to just sit on your hands.
That's part of land management. Yeah.
It's part of land management. I feel like our Dwight Center and the Bechtel House and any emergency responders coming in the case of a wildfire is going to be so much better off giving the result of this. There's a lot of follow-up work we can do. We have trail systems through there. Both our major buildings are right there. So there's an opportunity to really do a lot of hands-on stewardship to start nudging this forest into what we want to see. And I think it's really important as we're trying to better understand how fire works in this current system with climate change, with fuel loading, where it is, with houses, where they are, to learn from this. And so I think there's a lot of lessons we're going to take away, and I think we'll keep learning lessons for a few years, watching the results come back, bringing people up, talking to them about this, other people with fire experience, other land managers. So I think we're at a place where we need to be having these conversations. We need to be doing things, taking caution with them, but then doing a lot of reflection on them. And so we're kind of in that stage now with this burn is, okay, what's our takeaways from this? How could we have improved on this? But it's a lot of like, don't make decisions right now because I think the spring's going to tell us a lot. I think the next winter is going to tell us a lot. So
So our eyes are open. We're taking the data. We're noticing what happens, and we're going to apply those lessons to future burns.
Exactly. And hopefully keep inviting a ton of researchers here and a ton of land managers and talking about them and supporting other people putting good fire on the ground, with the fact that we're reliant on this community to do our work and to learn and to help us learn. So we feel like it's necessary that we kind of contribute to the labor effort that goes elsewhere, but also the knowledge sharing that goes elsewhere.
As always, I wanted to know what it takes to engage in this kind of work and who contributes the support that is necessary to make these complex stewardship interventions possible.
The fire itself was largely supported by a grant. I'd say my time and energy for years putting into this was, supported by donors, Pepperwood donors.
Right. So maybe the line item tags, a lot of them went to a grant, but the overall
thinking, the writing, the burn plans,
long-term investment has been from the Pepperwood Foundation itself.
Yeah, and I went to grad school and did a 10-year fire stewardship plan for Pepperwood, so that contributed a lot to this. So like my time and energy in grad school also, I think, helped a lot because was thinking about this.
Higher education is still valuable, are you saying?
Yeah, totally still valuable. And just, a shout out to Dr. Don Hankins at Chico State, who was my advisor and was also a mentor in how I think and understand fire. And then just our partners, right? The fire forward team of All Hands Ecology is like just been a huge strategic partner. Actually, while we were talking, Brian Peterson, their fire ecologist, was calling me.
Hi, Brian. I'm sorry.
So they're a huge partner, and the main reason I know as much about fire as I do and able to do that, and just are ready to support prescribed burns in our community. CAL FIRE, Sonoma County Fire District as well, in terms of permitting, getting the word out, just being a good strategic partner and the face that the community trusts a lot. And so it's really important to have these trusting authority figures show their support to you. I will also say the state government. So Gavin Newsom has made a number of executive orders to push prescribed fire and ease some of the barriers prescribed fire and put mandates on state agencies to support prescribed fire. And so that's been a big help because, right, you have these top level, you have the state saying like, yes, we need prescribed fire. Yes, we need to support cultural fire. These are critical. This is how we keep functioning in this wildfire crisis we're having. And I think a big credit to that is acknowledging Indigenous fire stewardship, because that is, right, the knowledge base of like how fire works on our landscape and how it should be and how do we live in tandem with our natural world, which includes fire.
So the more that large-scale government agencies are actually starting to open their ears and listen to Indigenous knowledge, like the better everything functions, like on a practical level as well as sort of a philosophical level.
And it's amazingly happening from a bottom-up perspective.
Yeah.
They are not going, hey, we're going to come and tell you how to burn. We're empowering you to make decisions. Right, which is not necessarily the way government and authority always works. Yeah. But for this, is local knowledge base is hugely important, and who knows the local ecology better than most of these Indigenous communities? So, right, ranchers, preserves, local fire districts, local battalions in CAL FIRE know those areas really well too. So it's like empowering local decision makers and supporting local decision makers and the trust in them to make the right decision, because they know what's best for their ecology, know what's best for their land, they know what's best for their community, instead of someone from Sacramento being like drawing maps on a circle and being like, we need to burn here,
right,
without understanding what the ground looks like.
I can't tell you how comforting it is to hear that a statewide executive order is actually like benefiting anything. So it's that's a beautiful thing to hear in these times.
Yeah, and the other really beautiful thing about prescribed fire and wildfire mitigation is it's very apolitical right now. Right, it's both sides of political spectrums are like, we need to protect our communities from wildfires. It's not
we can all agree on that.
We can all agree on that. And I was recently at a conference in San Francisco, and there were two senators that zoomed in and talked to everybody. And it was a Republican and a Democrat, and smiling, talking about ways to move forward in legislation that is at a federal level that's going to help resolve this. And it's really about empowering people to be innovative, empowering people to solve the problems on the ground that make the most sense for them, and using fire for anybody that has done at scale land management, understanding budgets and how much this stuff costs. Fire is a no-brainer because you can cover a lot of ground at a lower cost and it's more effective.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let's keep it apolitical. Let's keep it productive. Oh, what a happy thing to think about is that this is a tool that we're all in favor of and that seems to be moving forward in a positive way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Devyn, so much for the work you do. Thank you for taking time away. Go call Brian back and have a great rest of your weekend.
Awesome. Thank you, Jules. I appreciate what you're doing and giving me a voice to talk about fire.
Devyn was so generous with his time for this episode. It was incredible to hear all of the big philosophical ideas and the intricate little details. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. But we're not done yet. It's time for this episode's installment of the Nature Sound Guess Who game. Each episode, we play a nature sound for you and challenge you to guess which critter made that sound. If you email your guess to podcast@pepperwoodpreserve.org, you may become podcast famous with a shout out on the next episode when the answer is revealed. Today I have a shout out to give to none other than Sean Jean. If you heard our last episode, Season 2, Episode 5, Bird Watching Breakthroughs, you will not be surprised that our bird expert guest Sean accurately identified the mystery bird call. Congratulations, Sean. Let's listen back to the mystery bird in question now. And that sound was made by the house finch. Yes, the house finch, Haemorus mexicanus. Their lovely song might be familiar to you because, just like their common name suggests, house finches are fond of hanging out near human habitations. I chose to highlight them because right here at the Dwight Center, we have a gorgeous population of house finches that sing in our trees every spring and feed their nestlings in our eaves through early summer. And when they do feed those little nestlings, they are feeding them exclusively with plant foods, which is a relatively rare thing within the bird world. Many herbivorous adult birds will make an exception for their young and provide them with animal protein, but house finches are die-hard vegetarians from the day they hatch. Male house finches have a reason to be picky about their food. The pigments that give them their attractive red heads and breasts come exclusively from their food. Their bodies cannot make that red color from scratch. Since female house finches select for the reddest males to mate with, appearance is no small consideration for those males, and good nutrition is crucial. Consider stocking your bird feeder with small black oil sunflower seeds to give them a hand. Thank you to Cornell Lab for providing access to the song recording from the Macaulay Library and for the species information that's available in the All About Birds website. It's time to listen in to a new sound and make your best guess as to who made it. We're taking a break from birds for a few episodes, so you can narrow down your guesses that much. Here comes the mystery, not bird, nature sound in 3, 2, 1. Second chance to listen in 3, 2, 1. Who do you think that might be? Email your guesses to us at podcast@pepperwoodpreserve.org. Until next episode, thank you for listening, and don't forget to keep your ears tuned into nature.